Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. And as always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maisland. This was All-Star Week in baseball, so a little bit of a slow week. Training camp for the Bengals is upon us. It will begin 6 days from the day we're doing this podcast. And we had some Bengals news this morning off the field as well, Rick.
Yeah, let's start with that Bengals news because, like you said, it's the All-Star break for the Reds. We'll come back to them in a second. But the Bengals announced Thursday that running back Corey Dillon and nose tackle Tim Krumrie will be added to the team's Ring of Honor in 2024. Those two will join Ken Anderson, Willie Anderson, Paul Brown, Isaac Curtis, Boomer Esiason, Chad Johnson, Anthony Munoz, and Ken Riley in the Bengals Ring of Honor. Skinny, what do you think of the additions of Corey Dillon and Tim Krumrie to the Ring of Honor?
Well, I think when we talked about the nominees, whatever it was, a couple of months ago, you made your picks. I made mine. Mine were James Brooks and Lamar Parrish, and I'm going to go on a Lamar Parrish tangent here in just a second. But you and I, we kind of debated James Brooks or Corey Dillon, and either way that one would have gone, I was fine with. And Corey being in, I'm fine with, and I think James Brooks should be in next year. I like Tim Krumrie. I think eventually he should have gotten in, but not ahead of Lamar Parrish. I mean, people, what are you doing? I mean, honestly, does anybody do any research? I mean, maybe that's the problem, is that they just don't. If it's not in their era, they don't consider it ever having taken place. Just please go do some research on Lamar Parrish and come back to me. I do this every time, and it feels like I'm crapping on the guy, and I'm not. He was a better player than Ken Riley. He was completely a better player than Ken Riley. Ken Riley is justifiably in the Hall of Fame, which means where should Lamar Parrish be? That's right, in the Hall of Fame. And by now, he should damn well be in the Bengals Ring of Honor. Wake up!
You have said this every time we've talked about this going back to 2022. I looked at the notes, or maybe even 2021 when it was first becoming a thing. Because I remember, I think it was the year before they actually announced they were doing it. Yeah. There was a picture that came out, like a screenshot of something, and people started speculating that, oh no, the Bengals are doing a Ring of Honor. So we talked about that at that time, and you were already on the Lamar Parrish train. When we talked about it earlier this spring, when they first announced the new crop that was going to be voted on, you had mentioned James Brooks, like you just said, or Corey Dillon. And then you mentioned Chris Collinsworth and Lamar Parrish as the other two names that you thought might be involved, mentioning that you thought it should be Lamar Parrish. I said Dave Lapham and Chris Collinsworth or Corey Dillon. So we were both kind of on the Corey Dillon bandwagon to some extent. Here's the funny thing. I mentioned Tim Krumrie's name back in 2022, the first year they did it, and you actually talked me out of having him on this list of like, well, like Tim Krumrie was a great player, but just in terms of production, all the other guys that there are before him, there are many other names. And so I actually agreed with you. I haven't brought him back up since then. And I don't think he should probably be in ahead of some of the other names that are still available. But he was a weirdly popular figure for a lineman during that era, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I like him as a player, and he did great things as a player, all of those things.
Was it the injury? Do you think it's the injury, though, that kind of made him almost more popular?
I guess, and maybe because these are season ticket holders that do the voting, and you get, a certain number of, if you've been a season ticket holder for 40 whatever years, you get that number of points. That's kind of in the wheelhouse of probably season ticket holders who are certainly still alive. And that, I think that feels like the sweet spot for the Tim Krumrie group. I think a lot of the season ticket holders of the Lamar Parrish era have probably passed on, to be honest with you. So Tim Krumrie's kind of in that sweet spot of a good chunk of the season ticket base is probably people who either watched him on TV for a period of time or were season ticket holders when he was in his heyday as a player. So I do understand that. And I understand their voting process for this to some degree. I don't know, man. This cat's going to die and he's not going to be in, and it's going to really piss me off.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't remember anything about his days. I never saw him play, obviously, but you have made the point so many times that I have gone back and looked up all the things that he accomplished. And it's like you've laid out before. It's not just how good he was defensively. He's one of the best return men ever in NFL history. It's crazy that the Bengals don't do more to honor him. Specifically talking about Krumrie, I'm just thinking as we're sort of going through this, I'm having this revelation. Can you tell me what you remember of his injury? Because I'm thinking now, basically what I know of Tim Krumrie, because this is right when I was born, right when I was a little kid, was his playing days. The only thing I really remember about him now that I think about it is my dad constantly talking about him breaking his leg, snapping his lower leg in the Super Bowl. And that's kind of my memories of Tim Krumrie, is my dad talking about that injury and what a big deal it was. What's your story around that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. People do think it affected the result of that game. I don't know if it did or didn't because the offense didn't play very well in that Super Bowl. It only scored, actually didn't even score a touchdown. The touchdown was scored on a Stanford Jennings kickoff return. The defense obviously did give up that drive to Joe Montana. That it resulted in the game-winning touchdown. With Tim Krumrie made a difference in that drive. Maybe he's a good player. Was a very good player. Wasn't noted as a pass rusher because he played inside as a nose tackle. Although he was a good pass rusher for a nose tackle. But yeah, no, Tim was. Listen, like I said, he's a very, very good player. I think he eventually deserves to be in the Ring of Honor. It's just I think they're missing the boat on just one of the greatest players, honestly, top 5 player in Bengals history, in my opinion. And nobody's going to be able to change that opinion. All I ask you to do, people, is go back and do some research on his career, look back at what he did, and don't just look at interception totals, because the reason why he didn't have as many interceptions as Ken Riley is people threw at him less than they did Ken Riley. And again, I'm not crapping on Ken Riley. I think they both deserve to be in the Ring of Honor. They both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Again, James Brooks needs to go in probably next year, in my opinion. And I'm okay with it. Again, like we debated a couple weeks ago or whatever, a month or so ago, I'm 50-50 on that. I could have flipped the coin and gone Corey Dillon, James Brooks. Okay, I'm good with however that result went out. I'm not good with this Lamar Parrish thing now for another year. To your point, among a lot of us who cover the team, we all thought there was a groundswell for Lap to get in, to be honest with you. And I go back to, I just think they ought to just put him in, period, end of story themselves.
Well, there is confusion around how you vote for Dave Lapham,
right?
Because as we've talked about, you're putting him in because of what he's meant to the franchise overall as a broadcaster and just a personality and loving and caring about this community as long as he has. And people love him for that. And it's worth honoring, but it's hard when you start trying to base it off, wait, are we supposed to be voting on him as a player? Because then he's probably not going to get in at all, maybe, and certainly not in the first few rounds. But overall, in terms of Bengals figures, it feels like he is big enough to be in there already, in my opinion.
I agree with you. And that's where I go back to, I think they just should separate this and just plug him in, period. Just do it themselves. Maybe it's a year where you're only voting on one and we're putting Dave Lapham in. And again, sooner rather than later, in my opinion.
So going back to the Lamar Parrish thing, do we need to do something about this? I mean, should we start a campaign for next year to make sure Lamar Parrish gets in?
I'm seriously thinking about it. I mean that sincerely. Again, I get that there is a segment and probably a large segment of the Bengals fan base that didn't see him, only know of his name, those things. If I had conspiracy theory tendencies, and I don't, but I do think of them. His run here with the Bengals did end acrimoniously with him and Paul Brown, and that's why Paul Brown traded him to Washington. And there's a part of me that just wonders if he's getting voted in, and they're just saying, nope, we're going to keep kicking the can down the road.
Brown Blackburn family is holding him out.
I don't believe that.
You heard it here first.
That. But
breaking news.
Man, I mean, if you're going on career achievements, it's a no-brainer that this dude's in.
I'm running with that the Browns are keeping Lamar Parrish out of the Ring of Honor, even though he's been voted in multiple times by the fans.
Do you see the vote? Do you see the vote?
I've never seen it. Have they ever been transparent about it and made it available for us?
I'm just saying.
Lamar Parrish is already in my mind. I think we should do that, though. I really think we should start a campaign for next year's vote to get Lamar Parrish in, like we're Bengals Jim.
Yep, correct. We're leaping for Lamar to get in the Ring of Honor. How about that?
I've never wanted to be compared to Bengals Jim in my life before now, but now I'm Bengals Jim.
There you go.
All right. A couple other things to get here with the Bengals. Training camp does start next Wednesday as we're recording this here on Thursday. So it's coming up quickly. I know there will be a lot of conversations when we get back to that in terms of storylines and all that. We'll probably wait a week to the wrist. That's right. We'll probably wait a week to talk about the wrist and what hair Joe Burrow is rocking and all of those exciting things.
Oh, my Lord.
We are still in the midst of list season where everybody's doing their rankings, and ESPN had one of the bigger ones of the summer just this past week when they released its top 10 players at each position in the NFL ranked by NFL execs, coaches, and scouts. A few Bengals appeared in the rankings at their positions. One of them, of course, was Joe Burrow, who's ranked number 2 overall at the quarterback position. Certainly a difference there between media members ranking. We talked about CBS's top 100 players overall last week, and Burrow was down the list a bit there, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. Whereas the execs, the scouts, the coaches, they have him at number 2. Any thoughts there, Skinny?
Well, I think to the point of what we talked about last week, it was kind of a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, right? Where he didn't finish last season. He's only finished 2 of his 4 seasons. But I do think that also shows you where those in the know really believe he still is and still is capable of being when he's fully healthy. I mean, he's transformed this organization into what is a window of championship contention. And he hasn't done it alone, certainly, but he's been a major part of that. And I think execs around the league clearly see that and clearly understand that.
Yeah, Pat Mahomes was number 1, Burrow was number 2, and it basically just said he's
Shocking.
the most consistent and the best out of all of these guys, aside from Mahomes. But I think the interesting part of that is when you get into media, when you get into fans, everybody wants to say, well, the injury thing is now part of the conversation. And I get that. I do. But it's funny how the people in the know are like, well, if you look at the injuries, no one is worried about those long term with him. I mean, maybe the wrist is the most concerning of them all to this point.
Correct. Yeah.
All the
Because
prior
we still
stuff,
don't know.
They're not compounding on each other. It's not like he's getting banged up over time. So I think the people in the know are much less concerned about the injuries than Bengals fans or other media members are.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I think Joe Burrow would be the first to tell you, like he did last week, of it's kind of a little bit of a thorn in his side, a little bit. So you know that he's out to prove people he's better than wherever he's ranked. And listen, whatever fuels him is fine. But yeah, I would certainly rank him no lower than 3rd.
Jamar Chase was ranked 3rd in the wide receiver rankings. Also, T. Higgins was one of the players also receiving votes. Now, how they did this, they did top 10 players at each position. Then they had like 5 to 7 honorable mention names for each position. And then they had others receiving votes, which is another group of like 10 plus. So, I mean, to be in the also receiving votes category would mean you're probably like top 30-ish at your position.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I get newsletters from CBS Sports, and one of them is a fantasy football newsletter. I usually don't open them. I open them selectively. And this was literally looking at the fantasy value of all Bengals players for this coming season and for the offense as a whole. And the guy who wrote the piece had T. Higgins ranked as the 34th best wide receiver. And that's probably right. And that's where, again, for all these fans that are, you've got to pay T top dollar, he's not valued at that. He just isn't. I hope he has the greatest year of his life and goes and gets paid. But he's coming off his worst year ever, statistically. He's coming off another injury-prone season. He's had 2,000-yard season, and that's very good, but it's not really the complete measuring stick anymore. I mean, it's averaging 60-some-odd yards a game. He's in that category of very good, will occasionally make an eye-popping play, but I've never considered him a number 1 elite receiver. I think he's very good and certainly a great number 2. But he wants to be paid as a number 1, and the Bengals not willing to do that. I'm not blaming them 1 ounce for that.
When you see this,
I mean, I would ask Bengals fans. I would ask Bengals fans this. I know you're not a fantasy football player, Rick, but I do this in these terms. Where would you honestly draft him in the pantheon of wide receivers? When you start looking at all the others, would you really say he's one of the top 10? Of course you wouldn't. Top 15? Well, he doesn't need to be paid accordingly then.
Right, and you're talking to a Cincinnati-centric group who are going to have him valued more high than most people are. So that's probably a skewed answer in general there. I do wonder, because this is NFL execs, scouts, coaches, does this tell you that maybe the market isn't as high for T. Higgins as T. Higgins thinks?
I think that's the case. Listen, he's going to get paid some. I don't think it's going to be paid what they think they deserve to be paid. I don't. I mean, it would have to be a Jamar Chase injury this year that leads to T. Higgins getting a wildly number of high targets and converting those into a 1,500-yard season, in my opinion.
All right, edge rushers. Trey Hendrickson, number 9 on that list, cracking the top 10. Did you think he would be in the top 10?
Yeah. I mean, I think just on the sack thing alone, but I think it also shows that again, he's very good. Is he elite? Is he a game changer, a game wrecker? And you and I talked about that he does make plays. He does affect games, but he doesn't do it enough to where you're like, oh God, they got to, that other team's we got to block Hendrickson this week. It doesn't feel that way.
A couple of other guys that were in the also receiving votes categories at their positions. Geno Stone at safety was also receiving votes, and Ted Karras for interior offensive lineman was on the also receiving votes list.
Yeah, CBS did one of their lists too, and I think they ranked like each literally position group, and they had Ted as their number 5 center, which kind of shocked me. That actually made me honestly go, wow. So another ranking has him 5th. So yeah, I can see that. I'm a little surprised, like on the receiving votes portion of it, Logan Wilson wasn't in there as a linebacker.
Bleacher Report, how we're talking about the interior offensive lineman, Bleacher Report posted a column predicting every NFL team's biggest bust of the 2024 season. For the Bengals, they chose left guard Cordell Volson.
Why?
Quote, last season, Volson had a rough time, but
no,
hey,
he didn't.
He's still a young player and will be 26 years old in 2024. More experience can lead to improvement. However, the reality is we've seen Cincinnati's offensive line annually underperform in front of Joe Burrow, and that's a concerning sign for someone who already struggled mightily. Are you concerned about Cordell Volson going into this year?
No, he had a rough start to last season, but he played pretty well over the last 8 to 10 games, and that's just a growing spurt for a player. He was only in his second year. Listen, opinions are like, everybody's got one, and that's all well and good, but I don't need a metric for this either. Some of these people just drive me insane. It's just like it's whatever you can hot take it against the wall and run with it. And honestly, the offensive line didn't underperform last year as a whole. If you go back and look, Joe Burrow was sacked the least number of times per game last season than he has at any time in his career. They have slowly built the offensive line, and I think that's why this year I wrote a thing when I was doing the position analysis that this will be the best offensive line he's played behind. You finally now have, for all likelihood, a legit right tackle to go along with the rest of the group. And so that's the other part. When you throw the ball 40 plus times a game, the quarterback's going to get sacked, some people. He is.
Just wanted to correct something too, because you had mentioned it. Logan Wilson is in the honorable mention category in the top 10 linebackers list. So not ranked, but he was actually ahead of the others receiving votes. He's in the honorable mention. So top 15-ish, top 16-ish there in terms of that list. That makes sense.
Yep.
One other thing to get to here with the Bengals, Stripe Hype posted a column entitled 3 Bengals with a chance to be first-time Pro Bowlers in 2024. The players included were T. Higgins, Geno Stone, and Amarius Mims. Your thoughts on the 3 Bengals with the best chance to be a first-time Pro Bowler this season?
Yeah, I think the only way Amarius Mims would be is if he starts early, and I don't know if that happens if Trent Brown's healthy. I do think this. I do think Amarius Mims is going to start games, plural, this season just because of Trent Brown's injury history. But I would think to be that, he'd have to start 12 to 14 games, and I don't know if that's going to be the case. I mean, listen, I love the Geno Stone signing. I hope it works out because he was really good for Baltimore last year. It's kind of that he's now on people's radar because of the year he had, and that's kind of how this evolves, is get on the radar for a year you had, follow it up on maybe a team that makes a long run or has a good regular season, because Pro Bowl voting is done before the season's over with, and is in the conversation. And so Geno Stone's a good choice. The T one, I guess I get, but there's just so many damn wide receivers that are really good. That's a hard one to crack there, man.
Yeah, and no doubt about that. Anything else on the Bengals, Skinny, before we switch gears to the Reds?
Nope. It gets underway on Wednesday, and we are actually 3 weeks from tomorrow. Actually, three weeks from Saturday is the preseason opener.
It's hard.
That's crazy to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, it does not feel like that. All right, let's switch gears here to the Reds. We are currently at the All-Star break. The Reds get back to action on Friday night in the nation's capital against the Nationals. They sit at 47-50 overall, 4th in the NL Central, 8 games back of the first-place Brewers, and they are currently 3 games out of the final NL wildcard spot. Let's talk about the All-Star game real quick. There's not a lot to speak of, but Hunter Green didn't pitch real well. He came in for the 5th inning, gave up the 2-run shot that broke a 3-3 tie and ended up costing the National League the game. He also had given up another hard hit ball that would have been out in most parks. It was like 400 and something feet to dead center field, and a hard hit single before the home run that ended up winning the game for the American League. I mean, to me, that's always just a big who cares? Like,
correct.
It's an all-star game. Who cares?
Correct. The only thing I would say is I did want to see Ellie run. Didn't you want to see him run?
Well, yeah, I was going to get, so he came into the game in the 6th inning as a defensive sub. He went 1 for 2 at the plate, had a single, and I thought it set up perfect. Skinny, you're seeing on there on first base. He had several pitches while he was sitting there on first. I thought for sure we were going to see him at least take second. Do you think that David Bell being on the bench told him no? Like, don't take any chances or what?
So a friend of mine, we were having a beer yesterday, and the All-Star game replay was on in the bar we were in, and he said, and actually, we were there at the time of re-seeing Ellie's single. And I said, I'm surprised he didn't run. He goes, maybe he was told before he left, whatever you do in this All-Star game, don't get hurt. And maybe that was the case.
It almost had to be. When you look, because he wasn't even thinking about it.
No,
he was taking a step or two off, kind of laughing as he's going back, standing
and I
straight
realized,
up.
and I realized at the time he was technically, the tying run was at the plate because of his single, and they were down 2 runs. Maybe that played into it. But there's a part of me that just says that they told him, listen, dude, you can take an extra base if you want. You can run the bases however you'd like, but you're not stealing a base. We're not going to do that.
I tend to think that's what happened too, because it just looked like he had no intention of looking to run there. And look, I guess with the way that he slides over top of the base and the force that he goes into all the time, maybe you're worried about his ankle getting hung up, or he often goes head first, maybe his wrist or something like that. So I guess I kind of get it, but I'm with you. I was hoping we would get to see Ellie do what he does once he got on base. Skinny, the Reds are just one of 5 teams, the others being the Braves, Mets, Diamondbacks, and Padres, in contention for the 3 NL wild card spots with a positive run differential currently. How much stock do you put into that? Do you think that bodes well for the second half of the season?
I do, to some degree, because it seems like that eventually evens itself out. It really and truly does. That their Pythagorean record is not what it should be, and some of that's luck, some of that's 1-run games that you've lost, unfortunately, and that tends to even itself out eventually. Maybe this is the evening out process from last year of remember the Raleigh Reds, how many times they came back to win games, and maybe this is the statistical evening out of that. But those things do tend to even out a little bit, and it would suggest that this is an above 500 team that played, unfortunately, at a below 500 level. The problem, Rick, and I did this the other day, I just put doing math in my head. If you think, and I'm just going to throw out the arbitrary number of 84 wins, gets the 3rd wild card, this team's still got to go 37-28 over the last 65. Is it good enough to do that?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
Here's the biggest reason I say that, because I feel like the pitching staff has pitched above its level in the first half of the year.
I don't, to be honest with you. I think they've pitched the level I was. To your point, I'm not saying you're wrong.
I get. Let me rephrase it a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know that what they've done to this point is sustainable. I mean, they've been rotating guys in and out. They've had the days where it's been like a bullpen day. They've had Nick Lodolo coming in and out, back and forth. How much are you going to be able to count on all these guys to put together the same type of half a season they did in the first half of the season? I just don't know that I trust all these guys right now with the different injury things that are going on, the history of a guy like Lodolo. Hunter Green is looking really good, but there's still a chance that he has a regression in the second half of the year a little bit.
See, but to me, Hunter Green's now pitching to the level I expected him to eventually get to. Nick Lodolo, I've never had anything but high expectations for him other than the injury issue. And Andrew Abbott, honestly, I think last year, if you just cut off his season where he probably hit the wall and they were forced to pitch him because they were in a playoff race, Andrew Abbott's not got a pretty nice sample size of being a damn good starting pitcher in this league.
But again, last year he hit the wall in the second half. Lodolo can't stay healthy. Again, if these guys are just pitching normally and they've never had any issues, great. I feel much better about it. But these guys have question marks going in the second half of the year. And the first half was pretty darn good for a team that I wasn't sure about the pitching staff coming in, quite honestly. So that's why I would say I don't think they can play 9 to 10 games over 500 baseball in the second half of the year.
I think it's a big ask. And again, that's just getting to 84 wins. Maybe the number's 86. I think 84. It could be 83 for all I know. But anyway, I'm using 84 as an arbitrary number. It's still, they have to play a fairly high percentage of winning baseball to get to that record.
I have some predictions here I'm going to ask you to make in a second, and that'll be kind of one of them. But before we get there, Rhys Hines was obviously the big storyline coming into the All-Star break. How much do you trust him as an offensive addition this team needed in the outfield versus how much do you think they still need to make a big move?
I still think they need to make a move. It's been fun. I'll be honest with you, I did a bunch of yard work Sunday, but we got done in time for me to watch a chunk of the game, and I had it on the radio for a chunk. The couple of at-bats I saw from Rhys Hines on Sunday, I swear every time he hits the ball now, I think it's going out of the ballpark. And maybe it was the crowd reaction because he hit a couple of fly balls that were hit okay, like, well short of the warning track, but hit deep enough outfield. But it feels like, the ball's been jumping off his bat so much that anytime you see him hit one up in the air, you feel like it's gone. And I kind of felt that way. Like, oh, man, that's out. And no, it's not. Give me a week to 2 weeks. It's hard to answer that question because we've seen this story before across baseball. Guy comes up, guy gets hot. Again, the big difference for this is he was a second-round pick. He was highly thought of. Struggled hitting in AAA. We know that. had a pretty good year the year before in Double-A. It's a big jump to say, well, what you did in Triple-A, and you're going to be 120 points better in your batting average and 300 better in your OPS in the big leagues in your first time around. That's a big ask. And so was this just the typical flash in the pan that we see a lot of times? Or is he at least a legit enough power hitter to be in the mix? To put your point, though, I mean, I think for them, I think A, record-wise, and B, Rhys Hines-wise, because if Rhys Hines goes into a 2-week tailspin here before the trade deadline, we talked about this before, they still need a long-term right-handed bat solution in the outfield. No matter just for this season or not, they need that long-term. And so if Rhys Hines tanks in the next couple of weeks, then all he is not another bit parter you can occasionally tap into and hope. If he stays hot, then maybe they feel he is that long-term solution.
It would be silly. No one knows the answer to this question. It would be silly to have like a big hot take one way or the other of like Rhys Hines is definitely the answer.
Sure.
Rhys Hines is going to suck. He's got no chance. Anything like that. Which way do you find yourself leaning more, though? Do you think he's going to be the real deal, or do you lean more towards like, no, this is probably not real?
This is probably not real. Yeah. I will say the ball jumps off his bat, though. The key has been, and it was an issue in AAA, it's been a little bit of an issue here, too, is will he make enough contact to make it matter?
Yeah. All right, let's do some Reds predictions real quick, Skinny. I just have a handful of them here. They're arbitrary. There's no real rhyme or reason to any of them. Will the Reds play over or under 500 baseball the rest of the way?
I think they'll play over. I just don't think it'll be enough to get to the win total you need.
Will Elly De La Cruz become the second player ever to record a season with 30 homers and 70 stolen bases? He currently has 17 homers and 46 stolen bases.
I think he will. I honestly think he will. He goes in some home run, some splurges. He was in a splurge kind of at the moment. I think that's going to be just enough for him to get to that 30 number. And I think the 70 stolen bases will come easy.
I think that's automatic. I mean, he's almost to 50 already. It's almost impossible to think he doesn't steal 20 more bases here in the second half of the season. And the home run thing, I actually feel pretty good about that too. I mean, as good as he was for stretches during the first half, I didn't feel like he ever had a crazy power surge where he went on like a long run of hitting a bunch of homers in a row. I still think there's the potential for that. And like, he may slump, but it's going to be more of a slump with his average, not with him not hitting the ball out of the park at all, because he just got too much power there. I think he gets to 30 homers. I do.
I do. And probably there's one inside the park homer in there in him at some point too.
There you go. That's a good way to get to 13 more if you need it. Will Matt McClain play over under 20 games for McClain?
I'm going to go under. I mean, the right now, the target date for the rehab assignment is August the 12th to start it. That's a big ask to just stay down for a couple of weeks and come back up and start hitting. And I think they'll kid glove him as well. I mean, unless he comes up and he just starts raking right away and they're in a playoff push and they need him in the lineup. If not, I just don't think they're going to push it with him either.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What if he comes up, we get into the month of September, we're in the first week of September and they're like, oh, he's about ready to come back finally. At that point, do you even bring him back?
Oh, I think so. Cause I think there'll still be just because of the wild card situation that they'll be at least in it enough to have some early games of the month matter. And I think maybe for everybody's sake, including his, you'd like to see him at least face some major league pitching this year to say, okay, the injury's behind him. This is the Matt McClain we all know, and he's ready to hit the ground running next year.
Who will be the second half MVP for the Reds?
I'm going Spencer Steer. I mean, he hasn't hit a power surge yet either. He's driven in runs. Something tells me he gets hot at some point.
I like that pick. And then finally, do you think the Reds will make a move to improve? Do you think they'll become sellers? Or do you think they'll let the trade deadline come and go without much action like last year?
I'll go with the latter because I think they're going to be in that such gray area of not knowing well, we're only 3 out. I do think you'll see them maybe deal one of their relievers. There's a lot of teams sniffing around for bullpen help, and that's where you can usually get some prospects back. And honestly get probably more value in return. I just don't know if there's enough, and that's what sucks, if there's going to be enough right-handed power hitting outfielders on the market for you to give up something of quality in the organization.
I tend to lean there too. It feels like it's going to be a lot like last year at the deadline. It's you're too close to become a seller. I mean, with the third wild card spot, everyone's in contention still. You're only 3 games out. You've got a young, fun team. You're going to keep battling for it, but I just don't think I don't think they're going to be make a big move, but I definitely don't think they're going to sell either.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to a question we had that was for Ask Skinny Anything, but it's kind of related to all this, so we'll just go with it now. If the Reds finish 10 or more games under 500 and Bell isn't fired, what does it say about the franchise? I'll go ahead and head this off at the pass. All teams deal with injuries.
They do. This has been a catastrophic amount to some degree, but to that point, I mean, at what point is enough, right? I mean, if that's the case, even if it's change for change's sake, I think you have to make it. I think the problem is the extension he signed. I just don't see the Castellini family and the ownership group paying this guy to do nothing. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if there's enough groundswell in the fan base. Honestly, the old, I'm never going to another Reds game until they fight. I don't see that. I just don't see that groundswell in the fan base, right? I just don't.
Yeah, I don't think that this team is going to completely crash and burn and be 10 games under 500 either. But is there a point where no matter what, it's just unacceptable?
I mean, that's a pretty good number for it to be unacceptable, to be honest with you, especially when you don't have a whole lot of cachet built up to begin with, right? You have one playoff appearance in the goofy COVID year, and your team flamed out very quickly. Then what else really have you done?
Well, so then you're saying there's no win-loss record that could get him fired?
No, I don't think there is. I really don't. But I do think that honestly, if it's 10 games, to me, enough is enough. At some point, it's change for change's sake. I just don't see. There's two things in play here. What I think and what the Reds will do, and I just don't think they'll move on. I just don't. Because again, I don't think there's enough groundswell from the fan base that demands that change enough for the Castellinis to be bothered by it. Where else you gonna go?
I agree with that in reality. Or I should say in a realistic scenario, because I don't think the Reds are going to be 10 or more games under 500.
Right.
But if you get 10 or more games under 500 this year, then I think that groundswell is going to be pretty swollen.
And that may be the case.
Yeah. All right. The Reds also had their draft. They took Wake Forest pitcher Chase Burns with the 2nd overall pick. They then went with Tyson Lewis, a high school shortstop, followed by LSU relief pitcher Luke Holman, and so on and so forth for another 100 picks or so. Skinny, is there anything more pointless than talking about the MLB draft?
Probably not, but I will say this. I do like their recent trend of college pitchers in the draft. I know Hunter Green's not part of that, but Hunter Green was such an electric player, an electric arm, that it was hard to avoid taking him when they took him. But look at the members of this staff right now. Look, Nick Lodolo, college pitcher. Andrew Abbott, college pitcher. Rhett Lauder, who's struggling a bit in the minors at the moment. Last year's first-round pick, obviously college pitcher. Chase Burns, college pitcher. You mentioned the LSU reliever in the 3rd, college pitcher. I like that trend. I really do.
Shout out to Ryan Wagner. That's all. I don't know why, but whenever they take a college pitcher, I immediately think of Ryan Wagner. Because do you remember when they drafted him and then brought him up immediately and put him in the bullpen a day later?
Rushed him. They rushed him, for goodness sakes.
Which, by the way, we probably won't see Chase Burns throw in the minors this year, if I had to guess. They drafted Rhett Lauder last year with like 120-ish innings and
they did not throw him. Yeah, I think that's the same for Chase Burns.
Burns has about 100 innings, so I imagine they'll probably do something similar there.
I will tell you, I can't remember if they made the super regional or it was a regional. It was one of the college tournament games they were on against East Carolina, I believe, or Vandy. It was one of them. Anyway, boy, he's really good. I mean,
he's got fun stuff.
His stuff is
100
really
miles
good.
an hour.
Yep.
Let's get into Ask Skinny Anything. We've got an extended version this week. Start with, who would Skinny hire for the U.S. men's national team head coach? Steve Kerr is the current coach, so I'm not sure what. Maybe you don't like Steve Kerr?
Well, this is not the soccer question for the U.S. men's national team. I think that's probably what that question is.
Oh, is the soccer team in flux? I don't know. Why would they ask you that?
I don't know. I'll go with the Highlands coach who has had some success, or Covcast coach. I honestly
what's our guy at Cincinnati? Charlie Noonan.
I love him. Pat Noonan.
Taking the MLS by storm.
Not Charlie, Pat Noonan. No, honestly, I think he's really boy. I'll be honest. He's a kind of boring to listen to, but I think he's a really good coach.
Perfect. That's what you need for the Olympic team. The Olympic coach shouldn't say anything provocative.
Correct.
Yeah. Charlie Noonan. Put him in there. Pat Noonan, old man Noonan's boy.
Yes.
With Trayvon Blewett having his number 5 retired. I'm sorry. I'm thrown off by that question. Why the hell would anyone ask you about the soccer team's coach?
Because it's I'm assuming that. I mean, because you're right. Steve Kerr is the coach of the men's national team at the moment. Is that a bad choice?
Have a coach right now? Is that the issue?
No, they're I think they either just hired one or are in the process of hiring one.
Okay. So yeah,
they are in flux after they got booted out of the Copa America. They got knocked out there.
Okay. Well, with Trayvon Blewett having his number 5 retired, who should be the next local college athlete to have their number retired?
Tony Pike.
Oh, something for your boy.
I am something for my boy. I don't know the list of UC basketball players whose numbers are not retired. I guess I'd have to look at that.
Kenyon's the last one. It's Kenyon, it's Jack Twyman, and it's Oscar Robertson are the only 3, I think.
And Cheryl and the female Cheryl Cook.
Well, sorry. I thought we were only talking about.
No, but I think those are literally the only 4 numbers that are retired.
I believe so, yeah.
I think that's correct. Does Steve Logan have his degree?
I don't know that.
Because that's a criteria for some people or for some schools is they need to have their degree to have their number retired.
Do you take Steve Logan over Sean Kilpatrick?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Are either one of those guys retired jersey type guys?
I don't think of Sean as that, but in retrospect, he probably should because he did have a really good career there, and he's had certainly a.
Isn't he the second all-time leading scorer behind Oscar?
I thought Steve Logan was. Maybe he is.
Sean Kilpatrick, 2145. Steve Logan, 1985. Okay. Number 3. Yeah.
He's number 3. Okay, so Steve's number 3. Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to does Sean have his degree, and is that a criteria?
Yeah, Sean, I think does.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Steve Logan, I'm not sure about, but I mean, he was there for a full 4 years, right?
Yes,
but again, I don't have figured it out.
Maybe. Again, I don't want to assume either way because I honestly don't know. On the Xavier front, they hinted that they're doing more things like this summer. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Romain Sato's getting in.
Do you really?
I do.
I got to go back to one in the deep archives because I don't think he's in. Steve Thomas. From the 60s.
I do not think. Well, see, and that's the controversy because both of them wore number 10, Sato and Thomas. So fans have wanted there have been some fans who have wanted a combo done of like put Thomas and Sato in together.
I think that would be kind of cool.
I'll be honest. My thing on this is like Steve Thomas hasn't been put in for the last 30 plus years.
I know
that they could have put him in for. I just don't
last 60 years.
Right. But I mean, like, let's be more the current people who have been. Xavier basketball has been prominent. Yes. They've been thinking about these things for at least the last 20 to 30 years where it's mattered and been a big deal there. If he hasn't been put in yet, I don't think he's going to be put in. That's kind of my stance on that. I do think Romain Sato, he and Tu Holloway are the next 2 Xavier players, in my opinion. And I think Sato will be next.
Yeah, that's a good call.
But that's from a Xavier standpoint. From Kentucky, that's a tough one.
Well, again, the problem is you've had so many one and done guys that again, if college degree is the thing that holds them back from having their number retired, that kind of hinders that a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Plus, it's like when you start thinking about even some of the 4-year guys before you got into like who's the last Kentucky player to have their jersey retired?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know off the top of my head.
Because I mean, I feel like the standard there has to be so high. I'm trying to think of like I don't think Tayshaun Prince would be a guy that rises to retiring his jersey level. And yet when I start thinking
probably
about
not,
best 4-year players, that's kind of where I go back to. He's like where we left off with that.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. He and Keith Bogans are probably some of the really good 4-year players they had. I mean, Joe Crawford was a 4-year player. Yeah, Joe. Yeah, I mean, but he had really 2 years more than anything else. Now he was really good for those 2 years, but.
Yeah, I was trying to look up who had their jerseys retired for Kentucky, and it doesn't look like there have been any modern names, any somewhat recent names retired.
Does it have like years they did it and what the last one might have been?
That's what I'm trying to look at right now. I'm scanning through a list.
I mean, is it the Unforgettables? It's got to be somebody after that, right?
John Pelfrey is in.
That whole group all went in together. Darren Feldhouse,
Jamal Mashburn, that group.
Oh, Jamal Mashburn, Jamal Mashburn.
Tony Delk.
Oh, okay.
Is in.
Okay.
So that's Delk's got to be the last one there.
That's probably right. I could be pushed on Tayshaun or Keith Bogans, to be honest with you, but I'm not so sure. To your point, I
don't think they're getting in for retired jersey.
I'm kind of with you on that. I could make a case for it, but I'm kind of with you.
If you're doing like a Ring of Honor or something like that, yes. But retiring their jersey, no one's ever going to wear it again. That's a lot.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, I'm kind of with you. That's a fair point.
The retired jersey thing, I think you have to be really, really strict about your standards on that.
I do too. I'm with you on that. But to your point on the UC front, listen, Jack Twyman is just legendary for sure. Oscar, there's a no doubter there, and Kenyon was the best player in college basketball for a season, and I get all of those. But it feels like UC's history should warrant more than that, doesn't it?
Who else would you put in? Danny Fortson?
I'd put in some of those guys in those early 60s teams, for goodness sakes, that went to Final Fours and won national championships.
Yeah, those ones just get so hard because it's like,
I know
there's probably not hardly anyone else that's involved in the process that saw that the player knows about it. It's like, if they weren't put in before now, you have to ask yourself why. Like, that's where I go to with Steve Thomas and Xavier.
Yeah, I'm noting that, but
sometimes it does just drop through. I mean, look at Lamar Parrish in the back. Sometimes things just slip through the cracks. So it's not always warranted that that's happened, but I do think it becomes tough to vote for some of those guys this late in the game.
To your point, Danny, if you can look it back up, he's got to be top 5 in scoring, right? And he's got to be probably up there in rebounding in UC history.
Fortson?
Yeah.
I think he was 5th. Fortson is 5th. Yeah. It goes Robertson, Kilpatrick, Steve Logan, Deontay Vaughn, Danny Fortson, then Roger McClendon, Jaron Cumberland, Pat Cummings, Ron Bonham, and Louis Banks.
Yeah. Danny's got to be up there in rebounding too, though. He's got to be top 5 in rebounding, in my opinion.
Rebounds. He is, believe it or not, he is not in the top 6 rebounds. Okay. That shocks me.
That shocks me a little bit too.
But you know who is? Gary Clark, number 3.
But again, he's not jersey retired worthy.
No, not even. I don't.
So there you go. Yeah. So there you go. I would say Steve Thomas or Sean Kilpatrick, both of them.
Okay. Piggybacking off a topic from last week, what was the most unlikely come-from-behind victory Skinny ever witnessed in person?
In person.
I don't even know what conversation that was from last week.
But I don't either, but I'll go with this. I was in the ballpark the night that Adam Dunn hit that grand slam against Cleveland when it felt like they were dead in the water that whole game, and the place went crazy. That's one that comes to mind. I've been around for some Kentucky losses in the last seconds of games in football, such as the Mardi Gras miracle, the Hail Mary pass where I'm standing on the field, LSU throws a Hail Mary, all the fans start rushing the field, and that's when I turn around to one of these kids running by me, I go, "You just lost, stupid. Look at the scoreboard." Because it was
great moment, Kentucky football history.
It's one of my favorites. I was standing, in fact, you can see it. There's an ESPN clip of Chris Doering catching a touchdown pass in the last second. In fact, it might have been the last second of a Kentucky-Florida game. I am standing in the end zone. You can just barely make out it's me. I mean, literally, I'm standing there watching him run the pattern because, again, back then you'd have to go on the field to walk across it to go to where the interview room was. So I'm standing in the end zone at this point, and I see the pass. It's like throwing right at me, and I look over to my right, and I see Chris Doering coming across, and I'm looking over. I'm like, he's wide open. Here it is, touchdown. And it was one of those. It was a game in which Kentucky actually intercepted Florida 7 times and still found a way to lose that game.
Not the touchdown, but your reaction to those kids is the greatest, one of the greatest moments in Kentucky football history.
That's why, you know me, I'm an anti-rush the field, rush the court guy.
Yeah, yes, you are. And consistent with that, even back in, what would that have been, 2000?
That would be 2002, I believe.
Okay. What are Skinny's thoughts on mushrooms as a food?
Believe it or not, I like them selectively. I like them with like a good Salisbury steak with mushrooms on it. I don't get a regular steak with when I get a regular steak at a restaurant, I don't know if you're like me, I don't want any sauce with it. I just want the meat. I want to taste the meat.
Have you ever had the steak burrow?
I had so Paul Danner Jr. and I have an ongoing bet every year in which we have different our payoff is a dinner to the precinct in which somebody has to pay for drinks based on one bet. Somebody has to pay for the entree based on another bet. Somebody has to pay for dessert / after dinner drinks on another bet. And then we've got another one for an Uber. because we tend to over imbibe on that trip. But anyway, he had it a couple of years ago. I didn't, but he did give me like a spoonful of the sauce. Oh my Lord, it was good. It was really good.
I'm mostly with you on the no sauce on my steak, but I've also had the steak burro, and that's a Creole sauce on top of the steak, and that's incredible.
To your point, it is really good. But if the precinct, the steak itself, almost any steak place I go to, I don't need a sauce on it. But I will tell you where mushrooms are just superb. Have you gone to the Melting Pot before?
No.
You know of it?
I know of it. I've never been there.
It's a fondue restaurant. And somehow when my youngest daughter turned 5, we were actually in Washington, D.C. My father-in-law got buried at Arlington National Cemetery. So we went up for a full week and did the touristy things around D.C. and then attended his service at Arlington. And she turned 5 on that trip. And somehow we really hadn't planned on what we were going to do for dinner that night. And right by our hotel was the Melting Pot. So we went there, and it's become literally a tradition. There's one up in Montgomery here locally, and they serve mushroom caps that you throw into the pot, the fondue pot, and there's a sauce that they have. You've probably heard of the sauce. I know they're actually starting to serve maybe not their brand, but it's now in bottles I see in restaurants because we've got a couple at home called Green Goddess. Have you ever had Green Goddess?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You put the Green Goddess in that mushroom cap, it's the greatest food thing on the face of this earth. Period. End of story.
I'm all in. I love mushrooms. It's one of my favorite things. Well, mushroom and Swiss burger is my go-to, like, try.
Yeah, that's the funny part. I rarely put them on anything other than like a Salisbury steak. I don't know why that is.
I love them. All right, vacation travel question. Rank the best places to stop on the way to destination for gas, snacks, food, fountain drinks, etc. 1 through 5. The options are as follows: Wawa, Love's, awesome. Buc-ee's, Travel America, or Pilot Flying J, or Skinny can sub one of the above out if he has his own.
I love the Wawa. First time I went to it was a couple years ago when I was down visiting my daughter in Florida, and I'm like, this place is awesome. And then all of a sudden, guess what we got coming here to the tri-state area now? A Wawa. Yeah, yep. I love it. Now, I got to tell you, I know people probably consider Buc-ee's overrated because it's all the people talk about. It's legit. It is truly legit. It is.
Well, there's 2 parts to Buc-ee's. It's legit that there is like good food, clean bathrooms. You can, pulled pork sandwich, some beef jerky. Yes. All that is fine. That they do that well. But it's also true that you are walking into hell on earth. It is Walmart and what else? Like a NASCAR race and anything else where you find the worst of the rednecks of our country hanging out. That's what Buc-ee's is. And they all feel like they always have to be there anytime they pass one. So they're never not crowded. I came back from Lake Norris this weekend and we drove right past it both times. No thanks.
All right. Travel America. I'm not sure I've ever stopped it. I think actually, don't we have a Travel America, Rick? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. I think there's one right off of Route 18, isn't there? Right here, right off the exit.
That sounds right. I've never gone.
I've never gone either.
I have that. They've got the Popeyes connected to it. I've
yes,
gone to the Popeyes there. Yes.
I have too, actually. That's a legitimate point, but I've not gone into the Travel America portion of it. So
Same.
Yes. Okay. So I've done that.
Those are a disaster. The Travel Americas are just like a normal gas station to me.
Yeah, kind of. Pilot Flying J, they always just, I don't know why. It just feels like it's more of a trucker spot than it is for like a commuter or people commuting in their car spot.
It's a place to shower for truckers. That's what Pilot is. Yeah.
And they do have McDonald's attached to them sometimes. There's one on the way actually to Louisville that's a Pilot Flying J down there by Warsaw. That
McDonald's
has
or Hardee's.
So yeah, those are ones. What was the other? What was the other 5 of them they gave us?
Love's
is kind of in that. Maybe I'll tell you, that's Love's is the one that's off of I-71 on the way down. Is it not? Or is that Pilot Flying J? I've been in both, but I don't go out of my way to stop in a Love's.
I don't know. Love's and Pilot are the same to me. Like
they are. Yes.
Those are just trucker stops. They're generic. Yeah. It's fine. You can get a fountain drink. You can get a little hot meal if you want.
I'm all in on the Wawa. I'm all in on the Wawa.
I agree. Wawa's number 1. Begrudgingly, I'd probably put Buc-ee's at number 2 in terms of like what you're actually going to get there. And then the rest of them, I don't really care.
Or just like the rest of them are, my gas tank's close to empty. I got to take a leak. Oh yeah, there's a Love's. Okay, I'll stop in there for a quick one.
I would move Sheetz up into this list.
I like Sheetz. I'm kind of with you on that.
Like probably right behind Wawa in my opinion.
Yeah, I like Sheetz. There's also a place. There's a couple places when I drive to Pittsburgh every year covering the Bengals. There's a place I stop in Ohio, and I can't think. Maybe it is a Sheetz that I stop at. But there's a place that I love to stop there too. It's got good food, and it's convenient, and it's clean, and it's nice, and it's in a safe area. All the things you're looking for.
I'm thinking it's Sheets, because we used to do that
You
when
might
we'd
be right.
going to AAU events too. We'd always stop at Sheets on the way out of Ohio before we get into Pennsylvania. Or
Yeah, that
wherever.
maybe it is the Sheets.
Yeah. All right. If in honor of number 61, which by the way, happy belated birthday to you.
Thank you. Yeah, buddy.
What was the best birthday gift you ever received as a kid?
Man, I will say, I don't know why I got him as a birthday gift, and I was a teenager at the time, but my dad got us tickets to a Bengals San Diego Chargers game in San Diego. It was a Monday Night Football game in 1982. Go look it up. Bengals lost that game 50-34. It was an absolute shootout, and it was just a fun trip. It was just me and him. We went for, 3 days, 2 nights, and the game was in there. It was over Christmas break for me in college. I was a freshman in college. I was a sophomore in college. And the tickets, I got those tickets for my birthday that year. So that I'm going to go with that.
Yeah,
I got new golf shoes this year for my daughters.
That's not bad either for a 61st birthday. But
yes,
I tell you what, the trip to San Diego is pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, that was a good one. Now, again, he worked for the airline, so he wasn't out, a ton of travel money for that, but a hotel and the tickets to him. And we had good seats. I mean, we were on the 50-yard line, about 10 rows from the field.
It's still a lot of time to do all that too.
Yep.
Has Skinny ever gotten in an argument at a highly popular local rib joint before?
I know what this is pertaining to.
News?
No, it wasn't a rib joint, but it is a restaurant in Northern Kentucky.
All right, so we have an answer to this question.
So this is about a couple of years ago. We go out probably every week, very least every other week, with another family, and sometimes it's just the other couple, and sometimes it's they have 3 kids. 2 of them are married, another one's in a serious relationship, so sometimes it's just a big family group. So this night we went to a spot, and it was crowded. And they 30-minute wait, whatever it was. That's fine. Have a couple beers at the bar. Everything's going fine. Nobody's in a rush. It's all good. I think there was 8 of us that night. So they seat us, all well and good. Took a little bit to get our menus, and I look around to see what the waitress is doing, and she had a handful of tables she's hopping on. I'm okay with that. So finally get our menus. Took a little bit of a while to get the order. Again, I'm okay with all of this. We all are at this point. We put our order in, and one of the people got a bowl of soup to start with. Okay. Took a little bit for the soup to come out, but about 20 minutes, here came the soup. Okay. Well, in the interim time, there's a fork top behind us. People sat down. They ordered. They got their food. We still haven't gotten our food at this point. So we asked a couple times. Yeah, it'll be right. Your order will be right up. Okay. Another 30 minutes goes by. Still nothing. Nobody really even stopped to say anything to us. So we finally stopped the waitress again. She said, that order's back there. I'll have to go check again. Another 15 minutes goes by.
So at this point, you've been there for like an hour and a half or something.
Yeah, we've already ordered.
Yeah.
In the interim, these people are finishing up their meal and getting ready to pay. She comes by another time. She goes, I don't know what happened to that order. It's back there. I'm going to have to go check on it. At that point, I've lost my mind. So I walked up to the manager. I started to explain myself. He points his finger at me, and I go, don't you dare point your finger at me. And then I got really loud, and I made an ass of myself. I'm not going to lie. I did. But at that point, and then I got a tweet from somebody who said, I didn't like your reaction the other night. And I wasn't going to explain the whole story to him of, hey, dude, we literally took a while to get the order. It took forever to get our food. In fact, I started to get up and walk out. It was amazing. We all started to get up and walk out, and here came our food out of the kitchen. Isn't that an amazing thing that takes place?
Hold on.
Meanwhile, a group behind us had gotten seated after us, had eaten, had paid, and left, and we still haven't gotten it. Don't tell me that I'm in the wrong on that, Chief.
No, I don't think you're in the wrong at all. I would have left already. But I need more information. So a guy that was there, not involved, tweeted at you afterwards?
Yes.
How long ago was this?
About 2 years ago.
God, we've got to find this tweet. What'd the guy say?
He just said, I think you owe the staff there an apology for the way you acted the other night. And I didn't want to explain why I acted the way I did. Because I try not to. I'm not a big time. Who the hell am I? I'm a nobody.
Right. You not berate staff at restaurants.
I don't. I'm a good tipper. I sometimes my meal will come out maybe not the way I want it cooked, and I'll go, my steak's a little undercooked. I'm gonna live. I'll be okay. So I don't do that. I'm not that guy. But boy, that night it was like the final straw was again the group that sat behind. So what ended up happening probably was the order got lost. All you had to do was come explain to us that the order was lost. Can you replace the order? I would have done any of that. None of it. And no real good explanation from anybody other than it'll be up soon. Yeah. An hour's gone by. These people have eaten and they've paid and they're leaving. And we still don't have an order? Come on now.
One of the biggest issues in the service industry, and I'm not just talking about like restaurants, I'm talking about like I see it with people who do photo or video work for like a couple that had their wedding, right? You hire someone to do your video and then you give them the runaround. Like sometimes things get screwed up. Maybe you lost some of the footage on a memory card, or maybe you lost the order and you gave it to someone else or something at the restaurant or what have you. Go out and explain yourself to people. It makes it better almost every single time.
You know what's funny? So when I worked at Turfway Park for a couple of years, I did learn we were big on customer service, and we would have customer service meetings of how to handle it. And the thing I did learn from that, honestly, and I've gotten much better at that as my life has gone along, is give somebody an answer, even if it's an answer they're not going to like, because they're going to at least go, okay, all right. I mean, I've had arguments on the phone with people over some stuff, and all they do occasionally tell me, you screwed your order up. Oh, okay. Then let me replace it then. It's okay. That diffuses, as opposed to, it's around here somewhere. We'll get it to you in a few. No. Just tell me you screwed up, lost the order, or they screwed up in the back and they moved the order down and they just didn't see it and they took it. Just give me the explanation. Because trust me, I worked in the restaurant, but it was fast food mostly, but I know how some of this stuff happens. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes at McDonald's, people would send me a special order slip back. I'd lose it. Somebody in the drive-thru go, hey, do you have that special order? No, what was it? Then they'd say it, and I'd make it on. I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, but the problem is when you don't address it or you keep lying and be like, oh, it's back to, well, then you turn me into a crazy person. You start making me think like, am I crazy? Am I losing my mind here? What's going on with this? And then I
really like that place, but we haven't gone back since.
Oh, not good. You're not gonna call them out though.
No, okay. Not gonna do that.
We'll wrap it up with this. Please rank the following snack cakes: Ho-Hos, Ding Dongs, Twinkies, Star Crunch, Fudge Round, Oatmeal Cream Pie, Nutty Bar / Nutty Buddy, Hostess Cupcakes, Entenmann's Mini Donuts, powder or chocolate, or a wild card of your choice.
Well, I don't think it goes in this category, but the best thing from Entenmann's is the crumb cake. Do you get the Entenmann's crumb cake?
I don't get it, but I know what you're talking about. I have had it, and it is good. Yeah.
We usually only have it around like holiday stuff as a holiday, breakfast item. But man, when we do get it, oh boy, it's really, really good. Somehow we had
the crumb stuff on top, though. I don't even really want the donut part.
But the cake's pretty good too. It's really good. So that would be my wild card, and it would probably be up to number. It probably would top the list, to be honest with you. All right, here's the one thing I got to tell you. I don't even know what Star Crunch is. I really don't. Maybe I should. Do you know what Star Crunch is? I think that's
like a Rice Krispie-ish thing with chocolate all over the top of it. I don't know if I've ever had
I don't like
one,
I don't like Rice Krispie treats. I'm not going to lie to you.
I don't know what it is, to be quite honest. It's a chocolatey thing with crunchiness to it. I know that.
I like chocolate crunchy things, but if it's like Rice Krispie-ish, I don't know. So I'm going to put that one out of the category because I just don't know what it is. Nutter Buddy or Nutter Butter to me is bottom of the list.
Really?
Yeah.
That would have been my number 2.
No, it's the funny part. So I'm a goofy. I love peanut butter. I can just occasionally
out of the jar.
If I want a little snack, just take a little spoonful or two and eat it right out of the jar. Love it. Can't stand peanut butter cookies of any kind. Can't stand them.
Really?
Nope. Can't even stand the smell of them.
Do you know the fat guy move I've been doing recently somewhat? This is bad. Taking the jar of peanut butter and the jar of ice cream and doing like half scoop of peanut butter, scoop of ice cream, and then eating that together. Phenomenal. But there's probably 400 calories per bite in it.
So I don't get these very often anymore. This used to be like a Christmas stocking stuffer gift. Kids would be a bag of Hershey's Kisses. And they know I said, stop getting those for me, because every year after Christmas, I gain 5 pounds because I just throw a bunch of Hershey's Kisses into the jar of Jif peanut butter and start scooping them out, man. And you just can't stop. You just cannot stop, dude.
That's a dangerous move right there.
It's totally dangerous. So no more Kisses in the house. Ho-Hos would be next to last for me. And maybe it's because honestly, it feels like that's all my mother would put in my lunchbox as a kid. And I ate too much of them. Yeah. Twinkies are third from the bottom, believe it or not, on my list.
I would have them dead last. I hate Twinkies.
I'm not a huge fan. So the fudge round, is that the Keebler fudge rounds we're talking about?
It's the way I understand a fudge round is it's like an oatmeal cream pie, except it's chocolate cookie part and then a chocolate frosting in the middle and then like a little chocolate drizzle on top.
All right, so that's next as we move up. That would be number 1, 2, 3. That's number 5. Number 4, and they're underrated, and I haven't had them in probably 20 years. Hostess cupcakes are underratedly good, in my opinion.
I'm not a cupcake guy in general, and definitely not a prepackaged one.
Those were pretty good back in the day. Then Entenmann's mini donuts would have to be the chocolate. I'm not a powdered. It's weird. I like the crumb cake, yet I don't like powdered donuts. I'm goofy. I admit I'm goofy. But it would be the chocolate ones. Number 2, and this is probably surprising. Number 2, love me some oatmeal cream pie.
Yeah, that would be my number 1.
Okay, number 1 for me was Ding Dongs, and it's weird because they're kind of like ho-hos, but
I was gonna say that's a ho-ho, right?
It's not. It's just it's got a different shape to it, and honestly, it's like it has a different. I don't know what the
Ding Dong is a chocolate Twinkie, right?
No, chocolate cake-ish, but it's just it's perfect. It's honestly it's the perfect size. It's round. It takes about 3 bites to finish it, and every bite's as delicious as the next. It's just I don't know why. It's just one of those ones that's always hit me good. And the funny thing is, I probably haven't had one of those in 20 years.
Yeah, well, it was funny because
these are all like things out of my childhood that my mom would throw in my lunchbox.
Exactly right. So that's what's going on here. The guy who sent us this, he was texting with me, and he was saying that it's summertime over at their house, and they've got a couple young kids. So they are in their summer snack season right now. They've got all of these things at their house, and I was like, well, that's terrible because I would be putting on 10 to 12 pounds. And I don't even like half these things. I would just
correct.
They're there. And he said that's exactly what's happening.
No, literally, the only one I would not eat on the list is Nutter Butter. That's eat all the rest.
Nutter Butter and oatmeal cream pie are the only 2 that like tempt me, that I would actually like go out of my way to like grab one. The rest I could honestly leave, but if they're around me nonstop, I don't know how good my willpower would be to avoid them.
That's me with chocolate. I mean, that's what I don't have chocolate in the house anymore. It's just such a terrible weakness for me. It's just awful. I mean, I could literally, if you gave me one of those big Hershey bars, not the normal size, like those bigger ones that are on like shelves of
the 5-pounder or whatever.
Yeah, I could eat that with a jar of peanut butter. No questions asked.
Oh, you need a bigger jar of peanut butter, but yeah.
Yeah, no question. But I'd probably break it up enough to dip it in there. But yeah, there's no question.
That would be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's just too tempting, too damn tempting.
All right, Ding Dong, that's it.
Appreciate it very much. For Rick Brewing, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.
Sure, you can stop watching, but let's be honest, you want to know more. Tap the links or even better, click subscribe to stay in the know.